For the next panel, I'd like to invite three very interesting participants. The moderator on this panel is going to be Saket Moody, co-founder and CEO of Safe Security, that is coming from the US in person. Thank you very much. So Saket is the co-founder and CEO of Safe Security, an enterprise cybersecurity and digital business risk qualification company, a computer science engineer by education. He founded few companies before, and he will be hosting this panel. You have so many things that you have done before. It's a whole panel by itself. So the second participant on the panel is Harbour Singh. I hope I pronounced it well, and I do apologize if I didn't. Head of IT Risk and BCM for Emirates NBD. Harbour is the head of the risk of Emirates NBD. In this position, he is responsible for the development and implementation of group-wide information security framework and security governance, data protection, and business continuity protocols. Thank you very much for joining us. And the third, last but not least, and I do apologize, but your name is very complicated. Please join us on the panel. The CISO of National Bank of Fujiwara here in the UAE. He's heading the information security and risk in National Bank with over 20 years of experience. And he brings information security consulting and risk management specific to the financial service sector. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And you have your 20 minutes. The clock is here.
I can start from here, no problems.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Okay, so first of all, out of more than a decade of going to conferences and speaking, I've never ever started exactly on time. We're starting at 2:40, and that itself, I think, is good time management, which brings us to risk management for third parties, and we're going to talk about that today. The topic, as you know, is neoteric third-party risk management. Over the last year, if we all definitely have heard about the sunburst attack or the SolarWinds attack which happened, we all know how there was a backdoor that was implanted into a legitimate software that I'm pretty sure a lot of us sitting here in the audience use, and zero cybersecurity solutions could detect the moment there was an update and there was something that went wrong at the system itself. Of course, once it does lateral movement and starts doing some behavior and showing some behavior, there are various security solutions that could detect it. But this is really coming out as a new wave. And if you really double-click on that, you will see this is not very new. If you think about it, this is exactly what happened with ShadowPad, where there was a South Korean company which also used to still makes network management solution, and they were intruded, and there was a backdoor which was put into their software update, and the result was a lot of national critical infrastructure across the globe which was breached. If you think about it, that's exactly what NotPetya was. Because what NotPetya was doing is exactly the same. There was this accounting software which was supposed to be upgraded, and then there was this backdoor which was planted, and the moment you upgrade that non-cybersecurity but an accounting software, the rest was history, and the known impact of NotPetya was $10 billion. This was the known impact. I promise you, the unknown was much larger. The reason I'm giving you these examples is that no matter what we do in terms of running a SOC, running a SIM, no matter what we do when it comes to having our EDRs in place, WAFs in place, etc., there is still a very, very important element today. And more importantly for tomorrow, where the walls between the first party and the third party is absolutely getting to as minimal as you can think of. With the API economy that we live in, it is impossible for a company today to survive if they do not have this two-way collaboration with the ecosystem of the country, of the continent, and frankly of the world. And when that happens, you're no longer going ahead and saying, if I'm protecting myself, I will be secured. I like calling third parties as your friendly dark web. Why friendly? Because you work with them. Dark web, because you know so little about what's really happening in third parties. So to wrap up, my views on the third party side, and then we'd love to take both of your views, sir, is the world has seen two waves of third party risk management. The first wave was a questionnaire-based assessment where you used to send out, in fact, you still do that, whenever a third party gets empaneled or registered in your organization, you send them a questionnaire, people fill that in. Basically, what you're saying is, promise me that you're using an antivirus. Promise me that you're ISO certified. Promise me that you will keep your operating systems updated. Promise me that you are doing your VAPT, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. While that was good 10 years back, it definitely doesn't cut anymore when you talk about the new age threats. And that was the first wave of third-party risk management. The second wave of third-party risk management has been automated outside-in assessment. And this is where you have so many companies like BitSide, Security Scorecard, Risk Recon. There's a long list of companies which are out there which go ahead and do automated outside-in assessment. Now, while it does give some visibility, in fact, according to me, the utility of that visibility is you should not go with a good score, but if somebody has a bad score, that definitely says something about that third party. So it actually is a negative indicator, which is far more accurate than the upper bound indicator. That's the second wave. There's a third wave now coming in, which is all about automated inside out using APIs assessment of your third parties. And that we feel should be looked at as the future of third party risk management. I'm going to pause here. These were my views around how do you look at third party, having worked with a lot of companies around the world, and how they are really trying to reinvent the third party side of things. But let's come to both of you. You are both practitioners on ground and been there, done that in so many ways in terms of cyber risk management, first party and third party. So maybe you can start from you, Hari sir. What are your thoughts? You're a CISO of a bank, and banks have to now open up their APIs in the new fintech world and the startups which are out there. How do you look at third party risk management in such a dynamic and fast evolving financial services industry?
Yeah. Thank you, Saket, for that wonderful question. First of all, any organizations or many of the organizations, if they want to innovate or grow, they have to depend on third party. And that is where I'm sure we don't have a R&D lab to do a security research. We depend on third parties to provide that kind of research so that we protect our assets. All right? Yes. Due to the recent incidents, it opened our eyes how we need to manage these third parties. One is from the technology perspective, definitely we automate up to the level from the external to the internal scorecards and everything. But as an organization, do I know what kind of assets that I'm handing over to my third parties? That is a critical component that many of us miss, to be frank. Starting from not only the technology partners, as Harpal is previously telling, we have the legals, we have the creditors, we have the auditors, we have the regulators, where our critical assets are already there. How we need to protect that. So I start with, again, basic controls, inventory of my controls, inventory of my assets. Do I have inventory? If I have the inventory, that is the base for doing my risk assessment. Whether, if at all something happens to that third party, is my organization in under acceptable risk or not? If it is an acceptable risk, don't invest. If it is a not acceptable risk, then we can go to the management to go for the investment for the appropriate controls. And not all organizations will be having so much funds to go and do a third party. People struggle for the funds to do the controls at their organization only. Just imagine this organization going to the third parties and do the assessment and try to take them. This is one of the biggest hurdle that I foresee. And the third parties, knowingly, unknowingly, that previously the people in the panelists talking about 971 group, right? It's a great collaboration it is happening. Whether you talk about the vendors, whether you talk about which is the best security control need to implement and how you share these things, the collaboration is the key going forward. But there should be some kind of mechanism where if I feel good or bad or worse about certain organization, there should be some kind of collaboration need to be there so that the other organization depend on the experience of the earlier organizations. So these are my 3 key points that I want to highlight it.
That's incredible. Well, what about you? How do you look at third-party risk? No, I think it's not working. Let me just try this.
Is it okay?
Yeah,
Right.
perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, before I start, I need to put a disclaimer. The views that I express here are of my own. They do not represent the view of my employer. It doesn't represent the policies or practices that are there. Any example, if I state, that will be only for illustration purpose. Then not to endorse any product, any technology, or criticize them, be it individual, organization, or countries. Okay. Coming to the third-party part of it, I think Hari said it very well earlier, and following from Saket. I mean, when we're looking at third-party, I mean, people obviously look at, okay, fine, this is something which is not belonging to me. It is belonging to someone else. But we need to have a holistic view around the whole thing. It's like this. Technology represents one side of the coin for it. So whatever assessments that we're doing or we could do with tool-based approach, there'll be still one-sided approach on the coin. Now we need to look at different angles around it. Many point of time, if you're not fixing the business processes around it, they could cause issues around this third-party, outsourcing part of it. Now, yes, you do have your issues related to your legal part of it, your contractual obligations. Obviously, the regulators are there. Now, if you look at regulation, there are not many regulators who are enforcing that for third party you do X, Y, Z. I mean, one aspect of it is something like this, right? Now, if we go into third party, we go into cloud, or we go into any other aspect part of it, right? I mean, the line starts, the differentiation of the line is very thin as such. If you ask anyone in your organization, what is the difference between outsourcing, third-party, cloud, or whatever it be, I'm sure not many people will be able to differentiate that aspect. It's just that something is ours, something doesn't belong to us. People just look at it in that manner. So there is not many differentiation on it. So which is why when we look at any third-party part of it, we need to have a holistic view. So don't just look at only the technology bit, look at the business side, as we say, people process technology bit, right? Obviously the legal part has to be there. Another thing which has come off last few years is the cyber insurance. So whenever we outsource anything to third party, are we looking at the cyber insurance related to it? That's something that we should look at. Thank you.
That is very helpful. Thank you so much, Harpal. I would come back to Hari, sir. So you talked about how do you go ahead and define acceptable risk, right? So you say that, look, third parties, there has to be this line that you have to draw saying, hey, this is a third party I don't want to work with, and this is a third party I want to work with, right? But a lot of times the definition of the line can be very blurry. Now, if you ask somebody in your own team, and you ask somebody in your own board, and again, I'm not staying specific to your bank, I'm just saying in general, a lot of people will have their own interpretation on what is acceptable risk, what is not acceptable risk. How do you define the metric? How do you look at that, look, this is what I think would be the right way of looking at that third party, and as Harpal was saying, that it has to be super holistic also, because sometimes, because today's day and age, 99.9% of companies either do questionnaire-based or automated outside in, or sometimes you'll send physical teams to do third-party audits. But that's very expensive, right? Like even large banks can't do it. Don't forget about smaller banks. So what is your definition of an acceptable risk of third party, and how do you look at that?
All right. So it is rather, I put it in a different angle that, do I know my crown jewels? Okay, so do I know what is critical to my business? Okay, and is it known or believed by everybody in your organization the same way that you believe?
Okay.
Is it abide by your organization policies and guidelines? If it is that baseline is there in the organization, the coming to an acceptable risk is an easy component. But you asked the right question, is it easy? The question is not easy, to be frank. Okay, so, yeah, yes, sir.
Please go ahead if you want to add something.
Maybe I can just elaborate a little bit on what Hari said earlier. Now, what we need is, what is the cyber risk appetite for an organization? Now, if we have defined that, we can very well define, okay, fine, is this an acceptable risk which my management or board can accept, right? Now, that obviously comes through the various assessments that we do. I'm sure the tools are there to help out these assessments on an ongoing basis, on periodic basis, not one-time assessment as such.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that one.
Please.
This is where one is I can define in a theoretical way, go to the different departments, ask them what is the critical, and then put it. And the second thing is I use some automated tools that you mentioned about the third generation kind of the tools.
Sure.
All right, we need to mention some baseline. Like if I go and deal with some third parties, I'll mention that one. For example, they need to be PCI DSS certified if they are card related. Similarly, if I'm dealing with what kind of data, I will put some baseline to them. Currently, that is going in a questionnaire kind of stuff. Yep. If I have a tool saying that one at any point of real time, saying that one, if you want to do business with me, you should be exposing that API to me and connect to me. That's what you're talking about.
Yep.
If I have something like that, that adds value to overall my risk assessment to keep my baseline. Definitely.
Yep. In fact, not just on those lines, let me actually take it one step further and talk about that, because the inputs, and I really love what Harpal also said, that inputs from technology is only one angle, right? Your technology might be perfect, but if the person handling that technology doesn't know that, doesn't have to plug in a USB stick or click on a phishing link, it's useless, right? So people, process, and technology, and third parties extension would be fourth parties, right? And even beyond fourth party, you'll have fifth party, nth party, your concept, I love that, right? Now, I'll tell you the problem with that, and again, I would love to take your thoughts. If you take all of that also holistically in an automated way, because you can't do it manually, the number of third parties are too large, right? If you do that, and you come out with a red, amber, green, high, medium, low, A, B, C, D, unfortunately, even that is subjectivity. Because if you think about it, you're taking real signals from the ground, and you're putting your own layer of abstract. I'm not saying you're doing it, but most people, what I see is, hey, this third party's score is 87 out of 100. Now, what is the meaning of 87 out of 100, right? What is the difference between 86, 87, and 88? Has to be understood. Or it's just somebody sitting and making some formula in Excel, and that's the reason why you're getting a score. And unfortunately, I see a lot of companies which have heavily invested, but the moment it comes to translation of accurate on-ground data, and there are a lot of principles in data science, because remember, cybersecurity is not a different industry, right? Data science has been there for a while, and if you look at healthcare, you actually have these ways by which you have some standardized metrics of how do you look at risk in your blood level and your hemoglobin count and all of these things which are there. Unfortunately, we don't apply that in cybersecurity. So if you do red, amber, green after doing all of that stuff also, it's all effort going to waste it. Because if you ask your board members what is acceptable, somebody will say 85 out of 100. Somebody will say 80 out of 100, and somebody will say 75. And in most cases, it has to do with what their background has been. A lot of people come from a place where nothing less than 95 is a good marks. Well, some people come where 65 out of 100 also means a good marks, right? So it's just a mindset of subjectivity. And that's where we feel that, the future, risk only should have one metric, and that should be dollar values. There should be a conversion saying, if this third party gets breached, people, process, or technology, this can cause an impact of $700 million to us. Now that is no longer subjective. That is no longer, your board will not have two different opinions.
Absolutely.
Because now you'll say this is 10 million risk, you have 50 vendors there. You have 5 vendors in the $1 billion risk, because a lot of PII data going there, and there's a lot of stuff which is there. And that's been our conclusion of looking at third-party risk, that what metrics, it should not be ABCD, it should not be numbers, it should not be, oh, this is a red, blue, green. No, that's all subjective interpretations, right? It should be, this is the dollar value risk, even if it's not accurate to the second place of decimal. But just knowing that something can lead to a multi-$100 million loss or a $2 million loss, at least that visibility should be there. So we're running out of time. I just want to come back to both of you with your final comments. What do you think about a dollar value risk metric? And at the same time, any closing thoughts that you would have?
You want to take that? Or?
Harpal, why don't you?
So on the dollar value risk, I'm not sure how many have tried to do it before. I mean, it's not easy. It doesn't come easy. Unless until you tie in your business processes to it.
Yep.
So that what is the impact to business with all that? Let's say, for example, take the vulnerability that recently came out of solar winds, right? Now, if you look at solar winds issue, how many have looked at the share value of solar winds post that? It dipped. Where is it now? It's climbing back again. I think I don't see anyone from my executive or the board from Emirates Inbury, so I can state this. I mean, literally, it's like this, right? How many companies have closed down because of security issue? None so far. Yes, it does impact the business. It does impact the dollar value. Let's say on the share part of it, with SolarWinds, yeah, the market dipped. So it did impact. Even if they were using some sort of mechanism to calculate the dollar value, I'm not sure whether that was calculated down to the decimal. Yep. Even if they come close to that, that is still good enough.
Sure, but SolarWind's own impact would be first party. But if you have SolarWind as third party, that impacting your business, right, that can be calculated. That's just on the dollar value side. Right. Perfect. Right. Thanks, sir. So your thoughts?
So dollar value, I don't want to comment much because one is a dollar, another is a reputational factor, how you transfer the reputational factor into the dollar value.
Yes.
That requires a different kind of discussion. Rather, in the third party, I target towards the collaboration.
Sure.
As a key, like how yesterday Dubai government has able to show they are able to monitor each government with the index, cybersecurity index scoring. If that kind of index scoring, if we are able to do for the vendors as a baseline to shortlist, all right, that will add value to us. And always try to know about your crown jewels.
Yep.
So without knowing the crown jewels, where it is,
you won't be able to manage.
Quantifying is a big issue. And that is where many of these incidents we face in.
Got it. It is definitely a very, very interesting topic, as you guys can all see. And it needs more time to complete it. But since we started on time, I want to make sure we wrap up on time. Thank you so much, Cybertech, for the opportunity for us to speak here. And we will be around, all three of us. If you have questions, feel free to touch base with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.